So some of you did manage to notice that there was a kind of part 2 to the preparing your ATM lesson. And that was to think about a bigger context for using it, so that hopefully there might be a time when it's actually useful for you to have done this preparation and you can use it again. So we did ask you to think about a specific kind of target group that you might be teaching to, and to think about some other lessons that might have gone well perhaps before that one, that might have prepared them to do the lesson that you taught, or what might come afterwards. But to also step back a little bit and think about what would the specific needs of that group be. What might they be thinking that they want, or what might be useful that they could take into their particular life context. So, can we have a team that would be ready to share a little bit of your thinking? Throw the box at them. So could you just kind of tell us, who is your target group, what did you think they might need, and then how did you go about selecting a series of lessons?
Good afternoon. My group consists of Madhavi and Silvana and myself. Our target group was terminal operators, otherwise known as office workers. So people who commonly spend their days sitting on a chair, operating some sort of keyboard device that they have to look at.
Yep.
So fairly constricted and immobile in their day-to-day activities. So with that person in mind, we came up with the following things.
Bloody useless.
Thank you, Simon. So we were doing, we chose the B from the synopsis, which was the hand one.
Mm-hmm.
So we started office workers, computer people, which Simon just mentioned. The age group we targeted was 30-year plus. Usually that's how they started. They could be
They've noticed they've got a problem by then.
They're on the decline.
Yeah, towards. We also discuss about the chief complaints they might have is pain in the neck, the common language, stiff shoulder blades. Sometimes they might say locked in their shoulder blades. They might complain about tennis elbow, pain in their elbows, pain in wrist, fingers, headaches, one of the main complaints.
Yep.
Low back pain because of long sitting for long hours. And some of them might complain about redness in their eyes and eyes being itchy and watery eyes and all those words. Yeah, so now I'm
a rich field.
Yeah. Okay, so now to Silvana.
Teamwork. Can I just say that this looks like teamwork, but it's kind of forced teamwork. Orchestrated by Simon. Thanks, Simon. I should have gone first. You did.
There are many ways to manage a team. Yep.
So what is the next part? Okay, so we're up to, what part are we up to? I don't even know. We're up to the theme or the types of lessons?
What our ATMs were.
Yeah, so obviously we were going to do the hand ATM, but we
So is that the first one? Or?
No, we actually thought we might start with breathing. Our thinking...
Just a sec. Could we quieten the background noise a little, please?
Yeah. So we shuffled the order around of what we'd selected, so we can maybe talk about that, but we thought we might start with breathing just because we thought most people, and knowing yourself when you're sitting at a computer or looking at your phone, you're kind of in this trance and sort of stuck. So we thought they might get more out of the future lessons if they started with some breathing and, already found some breathing before they got into some of the other stuff. And then again, they may lose it completely. So we sort of talked about there being benefits starting with breathing or doing it a little bit later on, and we didn't really rest on a decision there. Then I think, I can't remember the order that we ended up falling on because we kept changing it, but did we lie on it? Yeah, so we went then with pelvis, doing some pelvic clock work. So, and not, pelvic clock work, but not big pelvic clock work because we're kind of thinking that these people would be pretty fixed in their pelvis if they're sitting at a computer, but enough to make them actually realise they've got a pelvis. So an easy pelvic clock lesson. Yep. Then we thought it might be good to bring in some eye at that point.
Yep.
So an eye lesson, and again, nothing too dramatic because just turning their head away from the screen might be too much. So just, again, letting them know they've got eyes.
Yes,
was kind of
and their eyes can be separate from the head. That's good.
Then, we've kept switching around. So we'll just tell you the lessons and we can talk about the order later. Yep. So we thought we'd do a shoulder movement lesson, but something that also wasn't just about the shoulder, but was about the relationship between the shoulder and pelvis.
Right.
Then we went with the arm lesson.
So that was
hand lesson.
It's called hand waving or something, wasn't it?
Not ground waving.
Yeah. And then, and I have mucked up the order here, then we thought we would do a head lesson, head and neck, so sort of getting a bit more movement through there. I've mucked up the order, but we kept changing the order.
Yeah, no, that's okay. That's fine.
But the main thinking about the order was that we kind of thought there's a lot of benefit in going straight into hand, but it's kind of useless doing that if they haven't figured out they've got the rest of a body.
Great.
So, yeah.
Good thinking.
And Simon,
well, but according to the crack team that you assembled, the order doesn't necessarily have to, well, I don't want to say matter, but...
Yeah, it does and it doesn't. Sure.
That's it. Just we'll start with keep it simple. Those key points which we discussed earlier, simple, easy, not too complicated to begin with, and then we can progress as they respond.
Great.
Yep, that's it.
Well done. Okay, another group? Yep, over here.
We're targeting senior citizens.
Okay, seniors.
And we're looking not to make the ATMs too hard, so we'll do one in standing.
Okay.
One sitting, and maybe one down on the floor. I just had a talk with Dan and Carol. We didn't want to make these ATMs too hard because I said to them, remember when we first started doing ATMs, you know, we were thinking, oh, you know, what's this and that? Imagine if you were an elderly senior citizen, what they would be thinking. So I thought we really needed to make them as simple as possible.
Sure. Okay, so there are seniors and seniors. There are your frail people who are basically, you know, in wheelchairs and walkers and maybe living in a nursing home. And then there's me, and kind of a whole range of abilities and self-perceptions.
Yeah, well, what I was saying is if you've got, I don't think it matters what sort of senior citizens, that majority of them can stand up and do the ATM.
Yep.
And that probably would be pretty easy. And then you're going down, you know, and that's even easy because the people in the wheelchair can just go about doing what the people are standing up are doing, you know, and then we go down a little bit more. And, you know, if people in the wheelchair find it hard, well, we go around and we give them a bit of guidance like we've been talking earlier today.
So your thinking is keep it simple and manageable so that they start with an experience of success.
Yeah, you know, but they notice it. Oh, I've got to move my heel to the left because the ATM that we done was heel circles, which is pretty easy, you know.
But it's lying on your tummy?
We can do that standing up, I think. I don't think there's too much trouble with doing a bit of a variation on it.
How old am I?
I haven't thought that out.
Okay, so just one thing with seniors, often, yes, they can do things in standing, but having a chair nearby that they could just rest a hand on.
Or the wall.
Or the wall, yeah, might be a good thing to think about. Okay, and so you could adapt maybe your heel circles to fit in as part of that set.
So, we were thinking that the theme of walking / balance would be a good one, considering that heel circles, in terms of gravity and being vertical, and so posture would go with that as well. And of the series, we have some different ideas and discussed different ATMs. One of them, I think, would be relevant. Would be the shoulder, having the free shoulder and chest. So if you're lying like this and then having to do that, that would be beneficial. And then another area would be the pelvis, being able to rotate, inwards or being free going out as well. So an ATM that relates to freeing up the rotation of the pelvis. Carol?
We thought we might start though with the extensor one where you lie on the ground for those and just slowly pushing into some of your joints like the back of your heels, the ball joints, or what the other word is for them, your pelvis and your shoulders, the back of your sternum, your elbows and your hands.
Mm-hmm.
And then while we were down there, we'd proceed to a lateral one where you could get your elbow and your knee just the slightest bit off the ground in the sort of cross position.
So is that teaching them about doing less?
Yeah, they're very small ones. Well, these are very small movements, not doing sit-ups.
There's a lesson called minimal movements.
Minimal movements, okay.
Does minimal lifting, minimal lifting is called, isn't it? Yeah.
Minimal movements, yeah.
Tiny lifts and tiny presses.
Tiny lifts and presses to sort of get that, and then to get that laterally so they might be able to take that into walking.
Cool.
You have it standing.
Oh yeah, and that was the other one. That was the standing up in this position and sort of feeling where the weight is on your feet and going left and right and back, and then eventually, around a little bit, sensing all the time the soles of your feet and where the weight is placed.
Great.
Those sort of small movements.
And the one that we first did with Arlene in January, the connection, like the shoulder circles with the heel circles, like lying side, might be good, or before or after doing the heels. I had in my notes to do a breathing one, but we didn't really discuss that because I'm obsessed with breathing.
There's a great breathing one where you're lying on your back and your feet are up. I did this with Zoran. Oh, sorry. With Zoran. It's not really the pelvic clock, but you're lying on your back and you're going forward and sideways, and then you use different parts of your body, maybe the back of the sternum, maybe the pelvis, or maybe the feet initiates the movement, just so that they can get, it's like a form of pelvic clock. Well, it sort of is a pelvic clock, but you don't actually do the clock. So, and you're just initiating those very small movements starting from your pelvis by different parts of your body, not necessarily the movement is from the pelvis, but you initiate it from, your sternum or your feet or your back. It's
great,
really pleasant and it's small movements. Yeah.
Thanks.
And I really liked one that I did with
This is about 17, I think, that you're up to. You've done so well. You've convinced them to come back for a second series. And
Well, we haven't talked about one of the sitting ones that we were going to do. It was just with Zoran, we did one to do with connecting the knee to the ground.
Oh, yep.
And like feeling, with the leg back here or here or here or there, and just kind of getting that kind of groundedness connection there.
Quick. Who's next?
Okay, just with the office team, how would you describe your theme? I mean, the group is a themed group in a way.
What we're looking at is liberating.
Let me just take a moment to do a commercial break. Next month, there will be a workshop in Toorak it's a Sunday afternoon, I think, isn't it? In July, yep. It's called Compute in Comfort. It will be led by Fran. It's a public workshop. There are flyers on the back table. Particularly anyone who either lives in Melbourne or knows anyone in Melbourne, please feel free to invite them. Either people who might benefit or other professionals who might be interested in the work and its application in that context. Thank you. Okay, next group. Who have we got? Oh, you've got it here, right?
We're the Skype group.
The
Skype group, because it was
Skype?
Yes.
Long distance relationships?
Byron Bay to Mackay to Goulburn. So we taught our ATMs via Skype.
Great.
And we hadn't really Skyped this together.
So this is one of those other teams that's going to emerge in the process.
Yes. And I was looking at my particular area and what group that would be. And we were looking at people who hadn't done it before. So they would all be beginners, but we were looking at a professional group of people. So we were going to target the professionals who hadn't done any Feldenkrais before.
As in health professionals, or
no,
just people who go to work and
just
earn
people
money?
Yep. Because
Okay.
they'd be able to afford it.
Good thinking, yep.
Could afford it. So we did the diagonal push.
Hang on, is there a theme or not?
Yes, we wanted to get them to engage with their trunk, their body, their thoracic spine.
How would you sell what's in the trunk?
I might just write that down.
The secrets of the trunk? That's fine, we can keep working on it.
It's evolving.
Okay.
So our diagonal push was quite complicated. So we put that at the end of our series.
Okay, and so that was your lesson from
Yes.
here?
And we divided it into 2 lessons. So lesson 5 and 6. We hadn't realised until Fran had pointed it out that being able to open up the shoulder is, because none of us had an issue with it, we hadn't realised that early on that we needed to include an opening of the shoulder.
Right.
So that would be lesson 4B.
Yep.
But we started off with a flexion and extension lesson, and then the head to the elbow.
Number 2.
Yeah, our dead bird, and linking the shoulder and the pelvis together, the side-lying one that we did with Arlene. And then we went to 4B, which was the shoulder.
Okay, so what did you call the Arlene one?
We just were able to differentiate between the shoulder and the pelvis.
So side.
Side bending, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Mm.
So you figured this was kind of cover a reasonable...
It was a really general sort of introduction to it.
Great, okay. Throw that at Leonie.
Okay, so our group is the 50 plus, we decided, and that was particularly because I was going to do some practice with the U3A group. So The first one, a flexion one, so a bending while in supine. So that's for coordinating flexors and extensors.
Yep.
And then I'm not really sure of the order of this, but a transitioning from supine to side lying and onto sitting. And then the reversibility factor can come into that as well. And shifting weight and balance and things like that. And also the coordination of arms and legs. Laying on your back. Not prone. And also I've got a rotation one here. So you're laying supine, so on your back, with your head fixed to the side. So it's giving that just to like the right side, I think. Yep. I did. And it's basically to open up the rib cage and to get a sense of that and moving and that twisting motion there.
Yep.
And also a lengthening with doing that. And the heel circles, which
That was your lesson?
Yeah, that was a lesson.
Okay.
And that was also to introduce prone, but without having that in the whole session, and to give more of an awareness of standing in the feet. So sort of the idea was to give an experience in different positions. Pelvic clock. And I was we were sort of indecisive with the last one. So I've got sort of two here. So one with for breathing. So that's sort of recognition of like holding the breath, the inhalation, exhalation, sort of bringing awareness to that. Mm-hmm. But also I really like the idea of the shoulder opening type thing and giving that experience, that differentiation.
Great. And so was there a kind of a theme in your mind as you were thinking that through, or a particular need that this group might have?
I was thinking of their abilities.
Yep.
And what I'd already experienced with the group as well at the time. And they are quite capable as well. So I sort of thought, oh, well, these kind of movements. And I was particularly thinking of the getting up off the floor, because that's an important thing, that being able, especially as you get older, that might be more challenging. So I was thinking those sort of things would be useful in everyday life.
Cool.
And that reversibility aspect as well, bringing that into it as well, getting down and up off the floor.
Okay. Great. Excellent. Another group beside you?
We kind of didn't do ours in a group. So anyway, this is mine. Because we did the waving hand. Because we did the waving hand, I chose office workers as well.
Okay.
And so my theme for the thing was connecting the shoulder basically, because a lot of people will be up like this when they're at an office, so the shoulders are up.
So would you call that differentiating the shoulder, or connecting
it's already up? I mean, connecting it through to the ribs and to the rest of their move, because otherwise it often, if they've got mouse hand and all that type of stuff, it's like their shoulders just like their limb is just away from them, and it just moves on their own. So I started out with number 1 from the book, because that has this bit where you're rocking back and forth and the shoulders kind of moving the hips.
Yep.
Then ATM 5, because it has the twisty thing where the arms are moving the ribs again, but this time in rotation. And of course all that sit up, lat through to the feet. Then number 3 would be the hand waving up and down, the ATM thing that we did.
Is that B? Yep.
B, yep.
Yep.
Then with Margaret, I've done this thing called, I guess I call it crawling prep, where you're on your hands and knees and your arms have to stay straight, but you lift your hand off the floor. So that's you have to figure out that your ribs lift your hand off the floor. Do you know what I mean? Like you set out like that and you have to lift up like this.
Okay.
Otherwise, you have to bend the arm, and this one gets a lot of weight on
Okay,
it.
we could call that connecting your hands to your ribs, could we?
Yeah, crawling, but it goes into a whole.
Oh, okay.
You lift the knee up, and then both the hand and knee, and then you do the other side. It's almost like lying face down and doing number 3 from the book, you know, but it's on your hands and knees. Then the dead bird, number 5. Again, it's a rotation thing. And then 6 would be pelvic clock on chair with arms.
Cool. So your perception of their needs was kind of ungluing the bits that get stuck together. And so you've gradually taken things apart and reconnected them a little more usefully.
Yeah, and a lot of the time they'll be stuck in front of the computer and this will be moving on its own. So it was all about making this move with more of them. So by the time you get to the pelvic clock, it can be a minute move where the arms are integrated with your torso in the clock move.
Okay, so some of these themes that you've actually got in your mind when you're choosing the lesson are not necessarily things that you're going to tell your clients or promoters their reason for coming, but they help you make sense of what you're doing and how you select some lessons. Great.
Mine was more of a workshop, a series of 6, and they weren't necessarily building on each other, but mine was for runners. And it was specific parts of the body that would help them with their running, essentially.
Okay.
So I started out with ATM lesson 9 with the balance of the eyes to help.
That's the one we were doing yesterday, was it?
No,
with your scanning. Okay, now
we end up painting half of your face with your eye and that sort of thing.
What's that called?
ATM lesson 9.
You said special relationships.
It's not called that.
No, isn't it? As a means of coordinating
As a means of coordinating action. Yeah.
Lesson number 9.
Yeah, lesson number 9. Because that can relax superfluous movement or parasitic movement if you're getting the coordination through your eyes.
And so that's an idea you want them to understand.
Yep.
Great.
Another one was breathing. If you're running, you need to learn how to breathe properly. There's many of them, so ATM 4, for example. Buttocks, I stole Fran's one for the buttocks. You need good working buttocks if you're running.
The bell hand,
okay.
Of course.
You could use, with the bell hand at the same time. Hamstrings is it called Happy Baby or is it just a movement of it?
Just call it hamstring.
Yeah, I'm calling it Happy Baby.
I think it's hamstring lengthening.
Which is about
lengthening the hamstring.
And
it's holding onto the foot while the...
Yeah. There's also a demo in Amherst week 3 that is specific for hamstrings, and he's leaning on a chair and demonstrating something in that. Also, elbows and knees touching, so a side lying elbow to Amherst year 2, but I don't know what the lesson's called.
Okay.
So you're sideways and you're doing the elbow to knee touching, because obviously when you're running you need to get that connection there between the elbows and the knees together. And I can't remember what the last one was. Yeah,
that's okay.
I can't read my writing.
Would it by any chance?
Actually, heel circles.
Heel circles. Great.
Yeah. Obviously, flexors, extensors in your feet, and you're walking, and you're able to get that bounciness in your feet as well. And yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Cool. So your idea is helping people to let go or take off the handbrake so that things move better. Is that about it?
They're already running, but
yeah.
Already running, but I'm targeting specific zones of their body that they could improve rather than a gradual progression of things.
Good. Next group, up the back.
We went for the L group, 60 to 90 plus. And we're a rather diverse group with one in Perth, one in northern New South Wales, Armidale, and Melbourne. So we flew to Alice Springs every week. But
Technology's grand when it works.
Well, that's challenging. But with that group, we thought you'd start incredibly slowly, and just the sensation of moving and feeling parts of your body. Like
so you're going to teach them awareness first?
Well, yes. I think that would be huge, because I just don't think any of them would have maybe had an experience of that other than where they were hurting. And then we thought about what they would do. There was various things that, like, coming up and down from the floor, and yours was playing with your grandchildren or being able to interact with the grandchildren. And I was more, if they couldn't get on the floor at all, to be in a chair doing.
Okay, and did you think about particular lessons that might help with those things?
Okay, these are fairly random because I don't think we were a very cohesive group for various reasons.
That's okay.
In addition to distance. So we thought that we'd start with getting them doing a bit of work in standing and noticing, getting them to shift their weight from one foot to the other, just getting a sense of what that was like. And our theme for this is basically being able to get down onto the floor and get back up again.
Yep.
Which might actually, be 40 lessons. I'm not sure. We also thought we would. They probably wouldn't want to stand for too long. They get tired. We're assuming they're mobile. None of them are in wheelchairs. They've got canes and walkers and things, but they can stand. So they'd need to sit down, and we could get them to think about how it is that they sit down. I'm thinking about the one of the very early Feldenkrais lessons where he talks about how you sit down in a chair and how you get up again. So to get them to think about, how they sit down, they probably mostly go plop. But getting them to sit on a chair and introducing them to the concept of finding their sit bones. And some of them might be quite averse to the whole idea of sit bones because, the area of the body where they are. So we might need to do that quite gently with them. And getting them to get the idea of pushing off from their feet, pushing through their feet to be able to move their sit bones and remove that, $50 bill that's under one of their buttocks, sort of thing. We also thought that they could do the heel circles sitting in a chair. So we would do a modified version of that. Again, it's about getting them to feel some stability and where they get it through different parts of their feet.
Mm-hmm.
Just looking down my rather scrambled and reordered list. We would get them to get down to the floor using a chair or a table or the wall or whatever to get themselves down to the floor and get them to lie comfortably and get them to do a scan in that position. Again, getting them used to the language and the conventions of Feldenkrais. And we have to be very careful to tell them not to overdo it because they would probably tire fairly easily, the older ones, and also because of preconceived ideas of exercise classes. Okay, so get them down on the floor and get them to do, the ATM of it's just, raising both knees and getting them comfortable so they can stand, then starting to move to gentle tilting from side to side with that. And then those that are able to hold on to their shoulders and see if we could get them to do some diagonal twisting in different directions. Once we had them on the floor and got them comfortable there and got them to think about how they use their knees, we would then get them up to sitting. And we weren't quite clear exactly what we would do with that, because there are so many different comfortable sitting positions depending on, you know, what your knees are like and whether or not you can sit with props underneath you or not. So we're a little bit muddy in that regard. And I will just hand over to my colleagues to add in.
Okay, were you thinking sitting on the floor or coming back to chairs? Okay.
Sitting on the floor so they can play with their grandchildren.
Okay, great.
And also getting up again. So we thought it would be a very slow progression, getting them from standing to sitting to the floor, to sitting on the floor.
So once you've got them down there, they're there for 3 weeks.
Well, that's exactly. You know, I've been told that. Once I'm down here, I'm fine. So helping them to find ways of using different parts of their body to get them to standing.
Okay.
And particularly that push through the feet.
Great.
Oh, the only thing I was going to add is using their hands to feel the movement, because I think they would move something and not feel it moving. So maybe using their hands to feel where they were, or sitting on their hands to actually have another part of their body that's actually feeling the other part moving.
Yeah.
I actually worked on the workshop side of it, so if we're just doing the ATMs, I'll leave that now. You're just doing the ATMs at the moment?
Did you have particular thoughts about how you'd pack those into a workshop?
No, not those into a workshop, a separate workshop. So working on 60, 65 plus, and according to statistics, 50% of people over 75 have arthritis somewhere, so thinking of that. And the workshop was 3 hours, so the objective was to give these elderly people hopefully an enjoyable and inspirational intro to Feldenkrais method, and at the very least be not worse off physically than when they came. We need
an important goal.
We need that. 15-minute intro to the Feldenkrais method, talking a little bit about Moshe Feldenkrais, but about trying to improve his own mobility and how it differs from other therapies in that it's not an exercise program. They'd all be aware of that, or most of them would, and about improving their mobility through different movements and developing greater self-awareness. Then a 30-minute, we thought, guided talk on comfort and ways to achieve greater comfort, because a lot of older people, you can talk about comfort, but they haven't got a clue how to make themselves more comfortable. Yeah. So maybe going through different ways that you could do it. I know, sometimes they just don't get it by generalising with that. Then for those wanting to sit in chairs, making sure they had back support if they needed via cushions or whatever they needed. And if they were on the floor, maybe bolsters or something, ensuring that their hip sockets were above their knees when they were sitting on the chair, covering that aspect, towels, cushions, whatever props you need. For those who felt comfortable getting down on the floor, we'd make sure they had the right thickness of mats so that they weren't having trouble with pressure points when they were there, but still had skeletal support. And then when they were supine, they had the right head support, so that would need a little bit of talking them through it. Support under their knees and ankles probably be needed. And then explaining the importance of self-care and self-regulation. verbal guidelines about self-care and not improving and not exceeding their limits, not going too far and not concentrating on the end aim or having an end aim, but the process and their breathing and rests. So that was really all on that. And then a 45-minute ATM on breathing from Moshe's ATM book. We chose that one, hopefully to give the participants a gentle experience because they haven't been exposed to this before. And of course, because breathing is really important. Then we thought because of the age range, they really needed a coffee or tea and biscuit and toilet break for a while. And we thought that 15 minutes probably wouldn't cut it. Probably have to be 30 or they wouldn't be happy because they wouldn't have nattered to everybody. And then a 15-minute question time because a lot of people would have things they wanted to ask. Hopefully we'd know what to answer. Maybe not. And hand out our flyers that we've got prepared, which talk a lot about the self-care and the different things. And then a 45-minute ATM on sitting and standing from Frank Wildman's A Busy Person's Guide to Easier Movement.
Cool. So there's a couple of things there. So just sit still for a minute, Viv. The social aspect for most of us is something that we need to give some thought to. And particularly with some groups, allowing enough time that they can talk to each other and talk about their experiences or about everything else they need to talk to as well. For a lot of people, coming to a workshop or coming to a class is an outing, and especially for older people, it can be the highlight of their week. So thinking about, can you allow sufficient time for that aspect so that they're not just getting their movement class, they're getting their social time as well. And even if you need to charge a little more because it takes more of your time, it can be a really important part of the whole experience for them. The other thing that's a challenge for all of us to remember when we're giving people the instructions and the rules and the guidelines is, can we practice telling them what we would like them to do rather than what not to do? So it's easy to say, you know, don't go beyond this and don't this and don't that. But I really encourage you to figure out what words could easily flow out of your mouth that help people recognise what you are asking for. Now, sometimes we need to bump against an end to get a sense of that, but what we do want is really important to sow the seeds into their conscious and unconscious minds. So, next group.
I misunderstood a bit the homework, so I did by my own.
Of course, that's good.
And I was not so focused on Feldenkrais itself, more on what other teachers are around as well. So I did something for elderly people, and first the sitting up thing, that is with Feldenkrais. Then breathing.
Okay, so, sorry, what was your first one again?
Sitting up.
Sitting up, okay. What do you mean by sitting up?
Like he teaches...
How to come from lying to sitting?
No, from sitting, from the chair to standing, sorry.
Okay, yeah. Yep, right. Sit to stand, yep. Then breathing.
A breathing lesson, yes. And movement with the eyes as well, as a lesson.
Yep.
And Ruth alone did some with the pelvic floor. So she actually exercises the pelvic floor by walking, and that goes in your daily habit. So if you lift up your foot, you feel the pelvic floor as well.
Cool.
And I think that's more, it's much better than just exercising your pelvic floor 10 times a day or something. And what was...
So that's 4?
What? I forgot the other things.
That's okay. That's a good start.
Okay.
You can see some kind of recurring themes here.
So ours was the waving lesson initially, that we were building the lessons around, or the theme.
Yep.
And what we felt was that it freed up the shoulder girdle a lot. And so the group we thought we might target are people that are sitting in cars for a long time. So couriers, taxi drivers.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Probably, I'm guessing it'll be mostly male, in their 40s to 50s, maybe younger. Yep. And some of the names that we were thinking of for the theme, because we talked about that we're trying to, if you're trying to attract people from that area, we can't talk about freedom of movement, words like that, because they probably think it's a bit out there. So we thought it's just something simple like driving with ease or pain-free driving, just straight to the point.
Cool.
Then in terms of the ATMs, we couldn't quite settle on, yep, definitely this would be the order, because it would depend who perhaps turns up on that first day, and then we may reshuffle the order depending on the rapport and how comfortable they are doing some of the ATMs, as you'll find out in a minute. So, but the first one was, and I don't know the name of it, but it's prone or crook lying with the hands like that, that triangle.
I call it the windscreen wiper lesson.
Yep, that one. And then perhaps lesson 12 in the ATM book, the thinking and breathing.
Thinking and breathing?
Lesson 12, yep.
Yep.
And then the B, the right arm floating up. And then I think it was called threading the needle on all fours or something. It was something like that. I can't remember. You know, like that. Something for an ATM.
Oh, yeah, I vaguely remember that series.
I think it was called...
Probably called reaching under the shoulder or...
Something. Yeah, you know which one.
One of those?
Yeah. And then perhaps the pelvic clock, because hopefully in sitting, so hopefully they're comfortable to, you know, explore that, because, yeah, men in their 40s and 50s, yeah, might not, you know. Mm-hmm. And then perhaps finally to sort of bring it together in terms of the connection, I think it was Arlen did it, the head through the gaps, it's all of that, really opening it up through the chest, but then connecting, yeah, and sort of extending, because they're always, you know, more in that fixed, forward flexed sort of posture, to just really get all of that open but connect through.
Nice. Yep. It's a fun sort of a lesson to work towards. Actually, the last time I was up in Sydney to visit you guys up there, I came in a taxi from the airport and the driver said, "Where are you going? What are you doing?" I made the mistake of trying to tell him. And for the rest of the trip, he told me about how he's quite challenged by being tall and being stuck in a car all day and the pain in his back, and wanted me to diagnose and treat him there and then with my magic wand. But it's a real issue. There are many people who make their livings sitting in a vehicle all day, and vehicles are not necessarily designed to suit people, particularly people with long backs. So it could be a very grateful target group to work with. Good. Okay. How many sections of board have I got here, do you know? Only one? That's all right. We'll go down. No, that's all right. Another group?
I wasn't really a group because we all did it individually.
We can declare one person's a group.
Well, there's a group up here, yeah.
Good.
So
just bring the mic a little closer.
My colleagues at work, I work in a university, so it's for academics.
Academics, terrific. They need it.
Yeah, So these are people I know quite well, but and have not done much in the way of Feldenkrais, a little bit, know about it, but have tended to be yoga people in the past. So I wanted to do 2 sitting ones for them.
Just pause. What do you think they need?
They need a capacity to focus on their work and to shift between a lot of different things that they're doing.
Okay.
And they also need a capacity to, when they're working by themselves, to be able to focus, but they also need to be able to engage with people in teamwork and so forth. That's the way.
So is that about shifting attention? Or?
Yeah, shifting attention, and also being very comfortable where they are. Like a lot of them have sore shoulders. RSI.
Okay, so this is kind of getting more to the number, but they live in a toxic environment. So does anyone know any academics that don't? It's a very stressful and the.
Can we come and work at your place?
No. I mean, and this is not only academics. There are many people who unfortunately spend a lot of their lives in highly stressful, competitive, rapidly changing environments. So
I did have a bit of a chat to them about what they wanted, and I mean, dealing with anxiety and stress was one thing.
Great.
I mentioned
Okay.
as well. So, and they've challenged me to actually teach this series to them. So, yes.
Right. Okay. So now we've got a clearer picture of the kind of people and the sorts of needs that they might have.
Yep.
So you're going to start with a couple of sitting lessons?
So a couple of sitting ones, one doing pelvic clocks. And I was thinking of starting the lessons and ending them in chairs, but doing them on the mat in between, so they would get a sense of bringing that back up to their work.
Great.
Where they're
Okay.
sitting.
So this one's in a chair.
So pelvic clock, and also the rotation one.
Yep.
One of the things they asked me, and I connected with it as well, was about something they find they get tense legs at work.
Right.
So something to
Sitting with short hip flexors all day
yeah.
in a stressful environment.
Yeah, so something to do with legs. So softening legs, something.
Could we say softening hips?
Yep.
Yep.
I was doing B, so that was when I was going to bring in the hand one. Eyes too. There's a lot of eye strain that people report when looking at the computer all day, so something about softening the eyes and the head. And the last one was going to be around breathing and voice, because they have to talk a lot.
Nice series.
All right. Failed to see the group bit too, because I'm a group.
Excellent. Where some people come together and go away. And
we did send each other audios for the other part of the homework, but we missed this bit. So I decided to make it easy because I have access to a space, so I'll just do circus colleagues. I'm calling it warm-up awareness. And it's sort of integrating both the kind of things we already do in warm-up, but doing them in a Feldy way, but also keeping in mind the common injuries and pain that I hear about. So wrist, shoulders, neck, lower back, short hemis, and arm rotation.
And so is the critical thing teaching them awareness?
Yes. In the warm-up time, because there's things in here that they do kind of sort of anyway, but in an intense kind of pulling away. Anyway, so I thought I'd start with pelvic clock. And then in that, because they kind of know their pelvis to some degree, do lifting and rolling. And then spine like a chain to connect the pelvis and the upper torso, and then rolling the head. So I was thinking of the one that Alim did with the butterfly feet, and the same as what we were doing this morning. So in the thing it was called head carriage or something like that. Rolling head carriage going around. Anyway, And then, I don't know the name of this one I was asking this morning, but the hands interlaced, inverted in sitting.
Oh, yeah, that's a great one.
For their shoulders, their wrists, and also because they already do this all the time, but like this. I thought that I would introduce them to another way of doing that. We did it in Sydney. I've asked them, they can't remember the name.
Oh, is that part of the...
I'm calling it hands interlaced, inverted in sitting.
Thank you. That'll do.
Yeah. And then I was hoping to incorporate, because some of them already do these roles, which I probably don't have the right name for either, where you sit in butterfly and you hold your toes and you roll around. I was thinking of doing that one, and also the long one where you start lying on your side and you come up to the side, and seeing if I could maybe integrate those two, because they already do the rolling around one from Anna. And then I wanted to introduce another way to lengthen their hammies by doing the long leg one.
Right. Yeah.
Because
So we've done those recently too, haven't we?
Yeah.
Segment 6, rolling, whatever.
Yeah. So rolling with knees bent and rolling straight legs. And then the last one was the one that we did for our thing, which was the kneeling side bending. Kneeling side bending. So, and what was it? Yeah. Warm up awareness. Yeah, I think I've told you everything.
Cool. So that's a nice idea of taking something that's sort of familiar, but putting a new perception on it.
And if I had 7, I would have done seesaw breathing, because you end up upside down seesaw breathing.
Great, you can have 7.
Thank you.
Next group.
So I'm within the group within the group, same group. So I also used my workplace, so it's targeting allied health professionals working in the brain injury rehab unit. And that would include mainly physios, occupational therapists, speech pathologists and psychologists.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a few different sort of aims. So one was just to increase their exposure to Feldy, because they're always asking me about it. And
so that's a kind of a meta theme of yours, yep.
Yeah. Also thinking about potentially decreasing injury through using more awareness.
For their self-care?
Sort of for their self-care as well.
So, sorry, I'll backtrack a bit. The awareness of the Feldenkrais method, presumably you want them to appreciate the relevance to the context that they work in?
Yes.
Yep.
And then, so I had this sort of as my third point as sneakily, getting them to take away some of their ideas for their own body positioning and that sort of thing, but also for working with their patients. So with my ATMs that I've chosen, I've got like little suggestions of when you're working with your patient, maybe you could think about this or that or the other.
So both for your own well-being and for the experience and learning of the patient.
Yeah. So not for them to specifically do Feldy with the patient, but just thinking about one aspect.
Let's stop right there. I have another commercial break. Also on the back table, you'll find little flyers that talk about the Feldenkrais Fundamentals Workshop, which is a 4-day experience that's being offered in many places throughout Australia in the coming months. And this also has 3 aims. One is for this particular group, our colleagues, if you like, in this field of working with people and their improvement, to give them an opportunity not just to sort of hear that there's a thing called Feldenkrais, but to experience it in a way that might give them some useful tools that can influence how they go back to work with their clients and, with their own self-care as well. It's also providing an opportunity for people who've been to a few classes and workshops but would like a longer experience without committing to a whole training, to have a long workshop. And it's for people who are interested in training to be practitioners to get started and actually clock up a few days. So some of you had that experience where you came to the first couple of weeks, or the January developmental week that Julia did. And so as a run-up to the next training that starts next year, these workshops are being offered in Brisbane, Northern New South Wales, Sydney, Canberra, Melbourne, Hobart, Adelaide and Perth. The flyers up the back are for the Melbourne workshops, but if anyone would like either electronic or paper copies relating to other cities, please let me know. Thank you, and please pass them on to your colleagues, friends, family and anyone else you know. Back to Marissa.
Thank you. So I was going to call my series More Movement in the Middle, maybe with Marissa as well, if I wanted to be really corny. And I was just thinking that with relation to physios, like we're often, because we're sort of, taught to use our core with everything, and we're often working downwards, so we're kind of really quite fixed in our trunk. And if you look at most physios, they have trouble lifting their arms above their head. So we're not taught to really rotate in any of the work we're doing. So thinking about that. Also with occupational therapists, the ones that I work with are a bit scared of shoulders and don't often think about trunk position. Like you'll see them doing upper limb work, but they've got the person like this sort of working with their hand. So thinking about how they might use.
Do you also get
as well.
demarcation of which bits of the person they're allowed to work with depending on their title?
Kind of. Yeah, so
because
it's like OT's upper limb, but the upper limb doesn't, it's kind of like that visualization again of some people, like you said, that don't know that they've got the scapula and ribs and all that stuff. Like it's just the elbow down, really.
Because certainly I have a client who has, I think, suffered greatly by the fact that the OTs work with the upper body, the physios work with the lower body, and nobody connects him together in the middle.
Yeah, I mean, the physios where I work, we definitely work with upper limb as well, but I think it's time restraint and how much you can do as well, and that sort of thing. So that's interesting. And then the speech pathologists often do joint sessions with the physios and that sort of thing around with breathing for voice production and stuff like that. And so I think movement in the middle I thought would be useful for everyone, for themselves, but also for thinking about how they might use these things with their patients. So the first one I started with pelvic clock as well, just to increase their awareness of their pelvis and other parts in the middle, and get them to relate that to sitting comfortably and looking at their patient position. Then at the end of the, so when they start their breathing work or whatever, and look at how the person's sitting and if they can find a more comfortable position. It
sounds obvious, doesn't it?
It does sound obvious, but
yes.
Yeah, when you're so focused on one thing, sometimes it's hard. The second one I did was the one that we did with our group, which was a side bending in kneeling, just to get more movement through the middle. And the third one I chose was a breathing lesson. And I thought the speech pathologists and the psychologists might particularly like to have a breathing lesson. And then the last three I chose were more sort of bigger movement, more fun ones, because the physios don't like to sit still for very long. They like to, like Lisa said, feel a difference. So I did rolling with the arms sweeping over the head. So that's the one where you're kind of quite extended, and I think we did it towards the end of last year, and rolling up to sitting. And then rolling with knees bent up. So it's, I think, which leads into the baby rolls, but I don't know whether I'd quite get that far. And then on all fours, I don't know what this one's called, but it's the one where you're on all fours and then you bring one hand through underneath and it gets the scapula and you sort of lats and rotation in. Is that the one that you guys, is that the same one that you guys are talking about? Yeah. So
it's that one, whatever we called it
whatever
last
we
time.
call it, yeah.
Okay.
And I wasn't sure, I had tried to have a think if there were any particular ATMs that we've done or that I could think of that would be good for pushing and pulling and that kind of like weight shifting, standing, but I don't know if anyone else can think of any, but I thought if I did a bit of research, I probably could think of something.
Yep. Cool. Well done.
So Anka and Nicole and I are very lucky because we don't have to fly to Darwin. We can almost throw a stone into each other's gardens in Hobart. So we developed these together, but coincidentally, a real opportunity arose where I was teaching in a council place, a series by Eileen Bakirita, which I think are really great because they're very, very simple. They're actually designed for people to do Feldenkrais at home. And one of them is about sitting. So someone came to that lesson and she works in the preventative health part of the government's Department of Health and Human Services. So she asked me if I would introduce Feldenkrais to some of her colleagues. And I did a taster and then it turned into a 6-week little introductory series. So this was the ideal, had my mates here to help to put this together. So the Eileen Bakirita one, it's just a lesson on sitting. And I think it really moved this person because it involves a lot of rocking on the pelvis. So I don't know exactly what you'd call it, but it's one where you explore how you sit in a chair. So the theme for the whole series was self-care in sitting. And, you know, they were all people who are professionally interested in avoiding injury, you know, by preventative measures. I think everyone's going around saying sitting is the new smoking. And I gave each lesson a very similar or the same, really, reference movement, which was to sit in the chair and notice how you were sitting. And a part of that came from Anat Baniel. On her website, there's this little tiny video which you can do. It takes 2 minutes where you hold the back of a chair and you get that aha moment where she manages to demonstrate in about 2.5 minutes this change in your range of movement. So that was the reference movement. The scan was in the chair. And so the first lesson was the sitting one of rolling from the buttocks onto the sitting bones, onto the pubic bone and back. And it was quite remarkable how people got more comfortable in sitting. Then the next one was ATM number 1, standing from sitting. Again, another reinforcing sort of real aha experience. There's a huge range of fitness. Some of the people who are working in preventative care spend their whole lives glued to a computer screen, stuffing chocolate into their faces and drinking coffee. And they couldn't sit on the floor. So the next thing that I discovered through doing it really was how much getting to lighten the hips changed the way that people could sit. So the next lesson was the two from the, well, it was the one from the elusive obvious, but split into 2 lessons. So I thought it was, they also only had 45 minutes in the lunch hour. So the first lesson was just getting from lying to kneeling. And the second half was going all the way. And it was, yeah, it was quite astonishing. People who couldn't sit on the floor 3 weeks later found themselves able to do that. So I did a lot of adapting. When I got there and found that they couldn't sit on the floor, I just changed the lesson to do it on a chair. I'd already had an experience of someone not being able to sit on the floor, so I was kind of prepared for that. And the other thing that's in that little snippet from Anat Baniel is turning because somebody draws your attention. So a lot of people had issues in their shoulders and neck and a stiffness and a sense of not being able to turn. So I think a couple of those lessons give you a real sense of magic, you know, that Feldy produces this real change.
Mm-hmm.
And so then Anka and Nicole each prepared one lesson to go with this series, which I did using the same scan and reference movement with this different lesson in between. So they were supine to sitting, which was along the same theme as the one in Elusive Obvious, but a smaller part of it.
Coming up to the elbow.
And the one that somebody else mentioned, Dan, I think, Zoran's lesson of connecting in sitting between the hand and the knee and other parts. I haven't actually done that because I didn't do Zoran's training. So, yeah, I think it was remarkable to see the change, and very nice that they want me to come back and do it again in November.
Well done.
No, I don't have anything to say.
My group is Ella and Ilan, and we had the gentle hand as our ATM. Like a lot of other gentle hand, we chose office workers.
Okay.
And we began from a place of what are the actions they do most of the time? What are the things we think would be helpful for them to learn? So we said their eyes were fixed at a fixed distance in front of them a lot of the day. They had quite a static spine and probably a limited range of motion with their shoulders just being beside them and not going all the way around. RSI from keyboard and hip flexors that were constantly in one sort of angle. And also the need to find like their base of support and how that would affect their spine and their head and everything. And the idea that a lot of the day they don't actually think about their body, that their focus is elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So those were our main things we wanted to have a learning around. And whatever the ATM was, we'd kind of find a relevant bit in that ATM to highlight some of these areas within it. So just bringing awareness to the things that we highlighted that's important for them. So we thought we'd start with the pelvic clock so that they could find their base of support and how that influenced their spine, and teaching it from the perspective that that affects their head. So we'd do it on the floor, but then we'd bring it into sitting. And then it's a little bit like what we did this morning, where the shoulders go forward and back with the head hanging. We had them with the butterfly legs though, so that was number 2.
Okay.
So that's shifting your shoulders. And then we had a side lying lesson where they would reach all the way around them, opening up through their shoulder girdle. And after they'd done that, then we'd introduce the gentle hand. And then our 5th lesson was it's another side lying lesson we did, I think with in January, where it was about the angles of our hips, our knees and our ankles, all opening the same amount or all closing the same amount. And then we finished off like sort of on your belly, head and eyes up to the horizon, looking over your shoulder.
Cool.
Is that us?
No.
Oh.
So
our group was Bruce, myself, and Margaret, who's not here.
Right.
And we had the waving hand, and we initially thought office workers, but then we decided on musicians.
Right.
Since we had one in our group. And I guess it was sort of based around being able to sort of find easy sitting in order to sort of, lighten your arms. Some of the things we identified were sort of overuse things, sort of being in static postures. So we started with like a flexor lesson. So, and then moving on to a diagonal foot press lesson. We had seesaw breathing, pelvic clock, and then we put the waving the hand in, and then we finish with the dead bird.
Cool. So musicians or people playing keyboards, same sorts of issues, having their hands connected through to the ground and freedom through the whole chain of fingers, wrists, shoulders, pelvis.
I think because I play drums, so from the drumming perspective, you're balanced on your pelvis on the stool, and you've got to have coordination going everywhere. You see in that foot, double on that one, single on this one. You've got to be able to rotate. You've got everything's got to work.
Absolutely.
So all the things that we had here, in one way or another, was going to create that rotation or flexibility or whatever to be able to do it. But we talked about a few different musicians, and yeah, it's useful for most.
Fantastic. Well done. So is that it, or is there one more?
Voila, I think we covered the last group. Hooray! Everyone says. Signs of joy all over the place. Okay, we did. I think we were the only group to do D, which was side lying, twist to the other side.
Okay.
Yep. And once we'd done that, we discovered probably the reason why we were the only group to do that one, because it was a tricky.
Needed a bit of preparation.
It was a tricky little bugger.
Right.
Yeah. So. Target group, what a surprise, office workers seems to be a popular one.
Okay.
Yep.
Issues?
Yes?
What kind of issues are we addressing?
I don't know. Oh, well, I think we've been through this before, haven't we? Office workers issues, basic sedentary lifestyle, staring at computer screens. I think we missed actually the most stressful part of being in an office is basically your boss and your customers and clients, and the time pressures.
Yes.
So yeah, we do tend to sort of home in on the computer as being the evil enemy, but it's actually the deadlines and the time pressures and actually doing the work.
Well, you've been thinking a lot over the past few days about the effect of emotion and tonus and those sorts of things on and the effects of that on everything else. So I think for many people in many contexts, that's huge.
So the package of ATMs that we've come up with is as follows by my colleague Anastasia.
All right, so probably it's something that concerns the whole of the self. So we started thinking about working with the extensor, the extensor of the back, so opening up that area, and then the flexor muscles of the stomach. And this is exactly what we started with in our training, actually. So that movement of the legs going towards, or the curvature of the back.
Yep.
pulling up and feeling that part. After that, we're thinking to introduce the pelvic clock in a very gentle way without going into too many details, but at least having that connection. And after the pelvic clock, doing the sideline twist, which is somehow connecting the 3 previous ATMs. Adding to that, thinking about using the work with the legs. So the muscle of the hips joint and the legs, so the work where you lift up one leg like that and then slowly go down, and you do with the other.
Oh, the baby legs, yep.
And the opposite as well, and then going out, in again. And finishing with the, I would say, the hanging hand. I don't want to say the dead bird. So they had to complete work with that, which would really go into the torso movement and embrace the whole preparation.
Well done. So it looks like you've already got a repertoire of lessons between you that you could go and work with quite a lot of different groups of people. Now, you might emphasise things slightly differently. Some of you have started with breathing, some of you have finished with breathing, some of you have put it in the middle. But there are a kind of a basic bag of lessons that if you were familiar with this list of lessons that we've come up with, it would probably serve you well for quite a long time. You could teach it to many different groups in many different contexts with different themes and flavours. And it would be interesting, except we're not going to spend the time, to go back to your panel and say, if you were teaching these groups, which lessons would you teach? We'll probably come up with pretty much the same sorts of lists. Maybe we would know a few other fancy variations that we like and might include, but these are the basic lessons that are going to serve you well throughout your teaching career. Good job. You can call it... That's what I call it to myself. The title it's got in my notes is, I think, called Freeing the Neck, which is a name that came from the person that whose tape I transcribed it from originally. It's probably got a different lesson. I mean, that movement is done in one of the ATM book lessons. I think it's flexor extensor lesson in the ATM book. So you may or may not choose to publicly name your lessons, but for yourself, in terms of your book or your notes or your cards or whatever that you can go back to and find it again, call it something that you'll recognise when you go looking for it. Okay? Well, sometimes a metaphor is helpful, yeah. I mean, we all know pelvic clock. That's a name that we all recognise. There are other lessons that we probably recognise by the name, or if you do a few of the movements, people say, yeah, I know that one, but I can't remember what it's called. The important thing is to be able to find it when you want it.
What's the most famous ATM of all?
The most famous ATM of all?
Ubiquitous.
Just... So Susan's just saying the pelvic clock is probably the most taught lesson.
Well, it should be. No, it's not. No. Okay, break time?
Break time, yep.
Just 5 minutes.